Okay?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay.
And Dan's getting my...
Dan is coming just
I'll
with
get
my...
started then. Hi, everybody. My name is Cherie Soria. Can you all hear me all right? You're getting the right channel and everything? Thank you all very much for having us here. Last year, we were invited to come to the conference, and we were not able to make it because of our schedule. But how many of you were here last year? I did send a video to say hello. Well, hello to you all in person now. Good, thank you. I told a little bit about my journey with Ann Wigmore in that video. I'd also like to tell you a little bit about my personal journey, because a lot of people quite often like to know how I got started and how long I've been doing this high raw diet. So this morning, or this afternoon, I'm going to start by telling you that. I'd also like to allow my husband Dan, when he comes up, to tell you a little bit about his journey. We all have our own journeys and the reason that we got started this way, and so I think his is equally interesting, just as all of yours are. And we'd also like to talk about how to make this real in your life, because you heard a lot of science that would indicate to you that this is a great way to live. It's a healthy way to live. It's a way that will keep you from getting sick. And yet, how can you take this out into your homes and introduce it to your families? The food has to taste good. Of course, it's going to be nourishing, but it also needs to be warming in a cold climate, right? And so we want to share with you how you can do that, how you can be successful with a high raw diet. And when I say a high raw diet, I'm talking about a diet that is rich in enzymes and nutrients and raw food, and yet can include some cooked foods as well. But whether it's raw or cooked, conscious choices are made, because you can eat raw foods that are not the healthiest choices, and you can eat cooked foods that are healthy choices. So it's not how raw you are, it's how healthy you are, and how conscious you are about the food choices that you make. So we'd like to talk today about how to make those choices. What's the best fuel for these bodies? These bodies are like high-performance vehicles. We spend a lot of money on cars, and when we spend a lot of money on a high-performance car, we don't think about putting sugar and oil in the gas tank. We give it the right fuel. These bodies need the right fuel. And how can you give it that fuel every day without feeling like you're giving up something that you love, some kind of food that you enjoy? Because this way of life is not about sacrifice. It's about abundance. And I'm going to just go ahead and tell you a little bit about how I got started. The abundance in my family was an overabundance of the wrong kind of food. And consequently, when I was a child, I saw a lot of people in my family dying of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and most of them were obese. They weren't obese when they were children, but they became obese as they got older. My mother died when I was only 4 years old. She was 22. My sister died when I was 12. She was only 10. I never knew my grandfather. He died of cancer when he was in his 30s. My grandmother died of heart disease when she was in her 50s. My favorite cousin had diabetes so badly at a pretty young age. He was a little older than me, but they started cutting off his limbs, his legs, in order to save his life. And it was a desperate attempt to save his life, and of course it failed. He died. Cutting off his limbs scared me much more than dying. It really frightened me. So at a young age, I started studying about health. What causes health? What causes disease? There wasn't a lot of information in those days. I'm 66 years old, by the way. Thank you. But you know what? I'm not special. I think that you can tell by my story. If somebody were to say that I have good genes, you would say, no. Based on my family history, I don't have good, I might look good in jeans, but that's different. Having good genes and looking good in jeans are two different things. So I do not have good genes. The difference is that I make good choices in my lifestyle. And I would like to encourage you all to think about making good choices because it pays off. And the older you get, the bigger the payoff. And you can start now, no matter how old or how young you are, and you can find yourself getting healthier. And for those of you who are noticing that age is starting to creep up, you can get younger. You can actually grow younger. And you don't have to be dependent upon medications. I'm old enough to read a magazine that in the United States is called AARP, which is the Association for Retired People. Last year, when I turned 65, I read an article that said, when you turn 65, you should think about retiring near a hospital. I was thinking about hiking on Machu Picchu in Peru. And interestingly enough, in the next issue, they said that hospitals are the most dangerous places on the planet. In fact, they said that the leading cause of death, the three leading causes of death are heart disease, cancer, and medical intervention. That's the third leading cause of death. Actually, it's more of what Dr. Campbell would say is disease management. You go into a hospital, you can get an infection, and you can die from the infection. It's a very infectious place. Or perhaps you die from the surgeries. You know, people think raw foods are radical. I think some of the medical intervention that they do is far more radical. Cutting into our bodies and taking out our organs, that's radical. And a lot of people die as a result. They also die from the medicines that are given to them to try to save their lives, but the reality is that they don't. All medicines all allopathic treatments have effects that are negative. They all affect our bodies in negative ways. So I recommend that instead of turning ourselves over to doctors, we take care of our bodies so that the only time we have to go to a hospital is when we've had an accident, when we really have no choice. I was in an airplane crash in 1983. It was a very, very serious airplane crash. And I can tell you, I was very happy that there was a hospital nearby. But I haven't been into a hospital since then. And I don't take any medications at age 65. No, I exercise every day. I eat plenty of raw food. And my husband Dan and I, even though we own 4 businesses, we have 40 employees, we travel all over the world. I've written 4 books, and we're very busy. We're probably not less busy than most of you, and yet we're able to maintain a healthy lifestyle even when we're on the road. We're able to make healthy choices in the way we eat, and of course, there are some times when we skip a meal or all we can eat is what we find in the grocery store because there aren't any restaurants that serve the kind of food we want. But that's okay. We're willing to make those choices because we have addictions, just like you do. We have an addiction to eating, but our biggest addiction is to feeling good. That's my biggest addiction. I want to wake up feeling great every day. I want to wake up feeling like my life has a purpose. Like, I want to get on and do something that's important with my life. And if my body is not serving my best interests, I can't do that. I don't wake up feeling fantastic. and I have to sleep too many hours. So my husband Dan and I'm going to let him speak in just a minute, by the way. I often get stuck doing all the talking. I am purposely doing all the talking. But we are very busy people like you, and yet we manage to take care of our business and make good food choices. So I would like to talk to you tonight about what those choices are. And we'd also like to talk about, if you're going to eat cooked foods, what the best cooked foods are to eat. Because you can make choices to have 80% and raw and 20% cooked, but if those 20% cooked is potato chips, French fries, deep fried foods that are really salty, that's not a good 20% choice. So we want to talk a little bit about that too. And now I want to bring my husband Dan Latterman up here.
Hey!
Hey.
But run these strings.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. A little bit about my background is I started raw food diet about 18 years ago. My background was technology. I have a master's in computer science, and I was in Silicon Valley in California, where I was very involved in the start of the internet and technology, and I thought I was doing really well. I had nice house, nice car, but what I realized was my health was going downhill.
Can I pull this away from your mouth a little bit? I think it's too much.
Too loud?
Is that better?
Is that better? There we go. I was having chronic back problems. My cholesterol was too high. Allergies were horrific. I had put on extra weight. But this just seemed normal because the reality was this is normal. And congratulations for all of you because you're here listening and learning more about health so you don't have to be normal, because normal is ill health. The normal of society is not being healthy. So congratulations for all of you because you're already on a path to raise yourself above that.
Yes.
After I had started my journey, I had an opportunity I was between jobs in Silicon Valley, and a very important mentor of mine, Victoria Skovinskis, told me about a program going on at Hippocrates called their Health Educator Program. I said, well, now I have time, so I went to Hippocrates in West Palm Beach, Florida, and for 9 weeks took their Health Educator Program. And as you've heard from Victorious and from other people, I saw these amazing results, people curing themselves from disease, basically by feeding the right foods, removing the wrong foods that are causing harm from our bodies, people were healing. And this is unknown to most of the world, so you're hearing something that a lot of the world really doesn't know about yet, which is really quite unfortunate. But I got so excited about that, I decided that what I want to do is go back and dedicate my life to spreading the information about health and nutrition and wellness. So I went back to Silicon Valley, started a nonprofit, and started putting on events. We're bringing in speakers, doing events like this. So congratulations and thank you for all the people involved in making this event happen, because I know, and Cherie does, because we've done these, how much work it really is. So thank you all for that. And I just started spreading this information. I was lucky enough that one of the events I did, we brought Cherie Soria and Living Light, who was about 4 hours north of where I lived. She came down and created a beautiful class on teaching people how to make wonderful, delicious food. And I got to know her better, and after being involved in many events with Living Light, I decided that that was a group, an organization that I wanted to be involved in. So I went about working my way into making Cherie part of my life. And after some good pursuits, I managed to succeed.
He was very persistent.
It took a lot of persistence, just like changing your diet. It takes some persistence, and it takes, it's challenging. Part of, if some of you are hearing some of this for the first time, you're hearing things that require a new shift in thinking, because we've been indoctrinated, as you've heard, that we're supposed to drink milk because it builds our bodies and makes strong bones, and that we need meat for protein. And these are all fallacies. These things are not true. So now you're hearing the truth, so it does take a shift. And what we want to talk about, as Cherie said today, is it doesn't have to be difficult. The nice thing about a raw food diet is it's not about measuring and weighing and having to deprive yourself of things. It's about a lifestyle that is very fulfilling, and you get to eat all the wonderful food that you want that's really delicious. And the reason it works so well is what we want to add to our diet, the fuel that allows these miraculous bodies you've been hearing about, some of the things we do, to work so well, is we need a variety of the nutrients that the body can use as building blocks. And the way we do that is we get food that's rich in antioxidants, phytonutrients, and enzymes. And those all come from the plant-based world. Phytonutrients, these are things that come from plants. Phyto is Greek for plant. So the only place we're going to get these, which include the antioxidants, as Dr. Campbell had in his slide, and vitamins, are from our plant kingdom. And the way we make sure that we get a variety of these is to eat all the colors of the rainbow. I like to call it full spectrum eating. So we want blues and purples and reds and oranges, and a big base of our diet is greens, things like this wonderful wheatgrass and the sprouts, these living foods that are really high in energy, and all sorts of lettuces and things that are really full of chlorophyll and life. This becomes a real base for our diet.
And there are a lot of other wonderful green leafy vegetables that you have here. I know you have chard, you have kale, you have beet tops, the leaf. Don't forget about the leaves of the beets. I know that beets are a big part of your life in Northern Europe, but don't forget about the leaves. And cabbage. There are a lot of wonderful leaves that you can eat here, and as well as all of the other colorful vegetables that you have.
And the way that raw food really supercharges our diet is when we talk about phytonutrients and enzymes and antioxidants, these things that help fight aging and fight the effects of bad oils and free radicals, which are molecules that basically run around in our body and destroy healthy cells, is we make sure we have the maximum amount of these phytonutrients, vitamins, enzymes, by not cooking our food above a certain temperature. And that temperature is around 47 degrees. At 47 degrees and above, the nutrients in our food, many of them start dying off. And so we can eat a high vegetarian plant-based diet, which is really good because we're removing the animal-based products. But by maximizing the amount of nutrition by having our food raw, but cooked up to the 47 degrees, which is quite warm, and we want to talk a little bit about that.
It's well warmer than your body temperature.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be cold. We'll talk some more about that when we talk about how to really make this a lifestyle. So we get all the nutrition from our vegetables by minimizing the cooking and the heating. And the other things that have been talked about that we want to add to our diet are those probiotic-rich foods, the sauerkrauts, the fermented cheeses. One of the things that Cherie invented when she first, after having studied with Dr. Ann Wigmore and wanting to make this food really delicious and take it to a new level so that it could be really fulfilling to our bodies, was she created the concept of cheeses made out of fermented nuts and seeds that become really delicious. Because once we can make delicious cheeses that are based on plant-based products, we open up a whole variety of new foods that are available for us.
That's right. At the Ann Wigmore Institute in Puerto Rico, when I was there with Dr. Ann, we made a fermented sunflower pate, which gave me the idea that we could make other kinds of cheeses that would satisfy our need for cheese. How many of you have been afraid to eat a plant-based diet, strictly a plant-based diet, because you love cheese? Raise your hand. I'm up there with you. It's okay. I was there too. Don't be embarrassed. I was a cheeseaholic. I was absolutely addicted to cheese. And I was a vegetarian for the first 15 years after I quit eating meat at a young age. I was in my early 20s when I stopped eating meat. I didn't tell you that whole story, but I started doing that at an early age, and I started teaching people how to make great tasting food, which I was able to do because I won my first cooking contest when I was 12 years old, and I loved making food for people. I learned at that early age, 12, that if you make cookies for people, they'll do anything for you. And I'm still making cookies and other great tasting food for people. I'm a people pleaser. I love to see people smile when I give them great tasting food. And I know that if you don't give people food that they love, they won't eat it. So no matter how healthy it is, if it doesn't taste good, they'd rather die than eat food they don't like. And that's what people do. They're afraid to change their diet, so, they die instead. And it's a terrible choice to have to make. But I was fortunate enough to be so interested in health as a result of my family history, that I was drawn to more and more health professionals that were talking about how to achieve better health with a plant-based diet, until I came across some books by Dr. Ann Wigmore. And I went to the Wigmore Institute in Puerto Rico. This was when Dr. Ann was still alive. This was the end of 1990, actually. And I was fortunate enough to spend time there with her. And like Dan and other people that have talked about the living food lifestyle and how it has healed people of life-threatening, imminently life-threatening diseases, I saw those kinds of miracles too. What I learned, though, is that it's not really a miracle for people to heal when all of the foods that were doing harm are removed, and in place of that, foods that can regenerate the body are put in their place. And at the Wigmore Institute, in those days, we were only given blended foods. Well, once a week we got to have a salad that we could chew. But most of the time it was blended foods called energy soup that had 5 ingredients. And one of those ingredients was a probiotic-rich drink called Rejuvelac. So we were repopulating our intestinal flora with a probiotic-rich drink. And also greens, a little bit of some kind of fruit to balance out the flavor of the greens. The only salt was sea vegetables, and then we had sprouts in there as well. It didn't taste good, but most people were dying, so they didn't care. They were going to do whatever they had to do to get healthy. I wasn't dying, and I wanted food to taste good. And I also saw that people were getting well there, but then they were going home and they were going back to their old way of life. And once they were well, they weren't willing to just live on energy soup. And so they were going back to their old way of life. And when they did, they got sick again. And they had to return to the Wigmore Institute for more therapy, which was raw food, colonics, massage, exercise, and so forth. And so I decided that I had to make this was going to be my mission, was to make the food delicious so that people could go home, they could still have delicious food that would keep them healthy. And I made friends with the people in the kitchen, and they let me go in the nighttime when everybody else was sleeping. And I was able to bring in some foods that were contraband, almost like as if, this was illegal, like garlic and onions and salt. And I was able to start creating some foods that were tasty, but still not cooking. I was using a dehydrator to warm foods and to marinate foods and to create crispy, crunchy dehydrated foods to satisfy the need for a contrast in texture. Because we need not only contrasting flavors, but we also need contrasting textures. And food needs to look beautiful. It can't just be something green and blended. You know, we want it to be attractive and appealing to the eye. And so I went into the kitchen and I was making these foods. And Dr. Ann Wigmore came down to the kitchen, and every night, she would come and she would taste some of the foods that I was making. And she said to me, "You will be a beacon of light for my teachings." And I thought, well, does she say that to everyone? Or did she really see something that I was able to do? So I made a vow to her that I would not teach another cooking class again, even though I was a very popular vegetarian chef and instructor, and I was teaching at all of the international vegetarian organizations around the world. But I made that decision. I could not ignore what I was seeing there with the people regaining their health. Some of them gaining a level of health they had never experienced in their entire life. I hear so many people say, well, I'm not sick, but you don't know how wonderful you could feel. Maybe you're not exhibiting any symptoms of illness, but that doesn't mean you have the zest for life you could have if you were really exhibiting optimal health and you had the energy that you need to be able to do whatever it is you want in your life and to stay young and healthy for much longer than what society tells us we can. So I made that my mission, and I went home, and I truly did never teach another cooking class again, and started teaching only raw foods. And I wrote a book called Angel Foods, Healthy Recipes for Heavenly Bodies. No publisher would take the book because they said, this is way ahead of its time. Nobody wants raw food. So I added to my 125 raw food recipes, 125 cooked food recipes, and still no publisher would take it because it was vegan, and that was still no. Nobody wanted vegan food. So I self-published it, not to take no for an answer, because I'm like that. And a few years later, the trends changed, and then publishers were interested. But in the meantime, I met Viktoras Kulvinskas, who I had admired so much from the books, especially Survival into the 21st Century, which I read. And I was a little bit starstruck when I met him, you know. But he was so real and so approachable, and I had a very wonderful conversation with him. And I was catering an event that he was at, and he tasted my food and liked it very much and invited me to come out to his retreat center in Arkansas and cater an event that he was doing there. And after I did that, he sat me down and he said, "You really must train chefs. All chefs all over the world should know how to make this food." And I had just had this is getting into a long story, but I'll try to make it shorter because we have a lot to cover. But it's kind of interesting. I had just finished a meditation session, and in my meditation session, in my inner eyes, in my inner mind, I saw Dr. Ann Wigmore. Of course, she had already died a few years before. But she said to me, "What you are doing is good, dear, but you must do more." And I thought, what more can I do? I'm teaching people all over the world about raw foods. I just wrote a book. What more can I do? And then when Victoria said to me, "You must train chefs," all of a sudden I realized I had to start a culinary school. And I don't know if I had knew then what I know now, whether I would have done it. Because it's taken on a life of its own. But that was 15 years ago that I started Living Light Culinary Institute, which now is the only licensed culinary school in the entire world that is 100% raw vegan and organic and gluten-free. And people come from 60 different countries to attend our school. So what we are talking about here with the raw food lifestyle is a revolution that's happening all over the world. And it's happening because what we are experiencing in our country, in the United States, and what many of you are experiencing around the world in your countries, is epidemic or pandemic. It's because if you have embraced the Western way of life, and the Western way of life includes an overabundance of eating the wrong kind of food, and therefore experiencing the same kinds of health challenges. So I am so fortunate that I made the decision when I went to the Ann Wigmore Institute to embrace this way of life, and I thank Victoria Sklevinskis for encouraging me to teach chefs and everyone who wants to learn how to make healthy living delicious for themselves and their families, whether they want to be a professional chef or not. And about half the people who come to our school are not there because they want to make this a career. It's because they want to make it a lifestyle. They want to do it forever. And they want to share it with others because that's part of the joy of it. Now you can finish talking, Dan.
Well, that was a long,
I know.
long side trip from
You know me.
inventing cheeses.
Cheeses.
So we were
I
in
didn't finish that.
fermented cheeses.
You're right. I didn't finish that. So all my books from the beginning of Angel Foods all the way through contain recipes for fermented foods because I saw what was happening at the Ann Wigmore Institute. I understand the importance of friendly flora, of building friendly flora in our intestinal tract. And so I have included sauerkrauts of all different kinds, from cabbage and apple kind of sauerkraut, which is gentle and sweet, to spicy kimchi, kind of Korean style sauerkraut, all different kinds, and different kinds of cheeses that are fantastic, from Parmesan cheese that is just flaky like a real Parmesan cheese, to a cream cheese, to a cheese that's very much like ricotta, all different kinds of cheeses. Whatever different kind of nut or seed you use can create a different flavor and texture of cheese. And once I created cheeses, then the culinary world was open. I could create cheesecake and lasagna and anything I wanted that had cheese, I could have now, and that really made me excited, because when I became a vegan, I hated the vegan cheeses. The only reason I became a vegan was because I cared about the animals. Not so much that I cared about my own health, was because I cared about the animals, and I didn't want to be responsible for their mistreatment. And so when I discovered cheeses that were raw cheeses made from nuts and seeds, and they were so delicious, I was so, so happy. As a culinary artist, the whole world opened up to me again. Okay, now you can go.
Okay, so we're back to a variety of fruits and vegetables of all the different colors, with green being a base, because green is full of life, it's full of vitamins, full of nutrients, full of calcium, full of even omega-3 fatty acids, which are important to our bodies. We have our probiotic-rich food. Another advantage of a raw food diet is we get foods that are high in water content. Having plenty of water in our system is very important. We're mostly water. All of our cells have lots of space that's filled up with fluid. So making sure we're well hydrated is a very important key. And by having fruits and vegetables that are raw, we haven't driven out all that water. And one of the things that happens when we process foods and foods that are cooked is the water is driven out, and it also makes food that's very dense. Because there's no water in it, it's cooked down in a small space. You have lots of calories, and because we've cooked it, we have very little nutrition. So what you end up with is a calorie-dense food that will not fill you up before you've had too many calories. So it's very easy to consume excess calories without nutrition. And so it's not surprising that over time, when we're having cooked foods and processed foods, we not only end up having diseases because of the effects of these foods, we end up gaining extra weight a little bit at a time, and slowly it builds up and builds up. And that's what happened to me before I went on a raw food diet. I had gained quite a little bit of weight that I end up losing as part of naturally on a raw food lifestyle, because we have food, when we eat it in its raw and natural state, we have food that's very high in nutrition, and it's not so dense in calories per volume. So we actually fill ourselves up, but get lots of nutrients, which satisfies our body. We get to eat a lot, and our body gets nourished to the point where it says, I'm full, you can quit eating. And that's one of the things that helps our weight just normalize on a raw food diet, because we aren't getting an overabundance of calories. We're just getting a proper abundance of nutrition. So we have high water content food, we have probiotic-rich food, we have a variety of all the different colors. And those are really the keys. There's only two other things that we see normally that you cannot get from your food reliably, and we've heard some different opinions on B12 today. One we believe in, and most of the leaders in the vegetarian, vegan, and raw food community believe, is B12. It's essential for our nervous system, for the building of our DNA. So B12 is just a thing that we believe that the best thing to do is supplement. Add a little supplement. There's vegan versions available of vitamin B12, and it's just an easy way to make sure you get that, because on a vegetarian diet, there's not a reliable source.
On a vegan diet.
On a vegan diet. And as was mentioned, there's also a lot of people, even on a cooked diet, that have trouble with intrinsic factor and converting B12, and so having a B12 supplement for everyone is just a good thing.
And for years, like Dr. Campbell said, for many years, at least a decade, I didn't take B12. I didn't worry about it. I didn't even think about it. And I have had my blood tested, and my homocysteine levels and all that were fine. But I've heard so much from other leaders about the problems with a lack of B12 in our diet, that I just don't want to take a risk. And the B12 supplement is not toxic. So Dan and I take one little B12 tablet sublingually, that means under your tongue, once a week, and it's easy enough, and so we do it. And maybe we don't need it, maybe we do, and we do it anyway.
And another vitamin that we cannot get reliably on our diet is vitamin D. Vitamin D is a sunshine vitamin. Once upon it, we get it if we get out of plenty of sun in a lower latitude than where you're at and where we live, and if you're out in the sun. Once upon a time, we all lived in a more closer to the equator, where we got lots of sunshine, and our bodies made vitamin D, which are important for a lot of the processes. As Dr. Campbell says, it's the whole. We need the whole foods, and we need all the pieces. And vitamin D and B12 are two of the pieces that we need in our body that just are not available on a plant-based diet. And we do not get vitamin D from our TVs and from our computer monitors.
Not the right kind of light.
It's the wrong kind of light. So a vitamin D supplement. And with those two exceptions and that variety, we can get all of the raw nutrients, basically the building blocks that our body needs, that it can then, as we've heard, select from to do the work it needs, to basically be healthy, to be vital, to repair itself, because we have all of the raw materials, and that's a really key. But also key to having all the raw materials, as was talked about, is some of the things that you don't want to put into your body that can cause the body harm. And the top one, which we don't have to really talk about because it's been covered enough, is animal-based products. Animal-based products, as we've heard many times yesterday and today, are really a big challenge. Then when people start becoming vegetarian and vegan, there's some other choices that can be made, some that are better and some that are worse on that diet. And the top of the list of the vegan products to let go of in your diet is fried foods, things that are fried in oils. And there's a couple of things that make these very harmful for us. One is because they're fried in oil. Oil has been cooked at a high temperature, typically above the threshold of which and oil in the first place isn't good for us, but cooked oils that are very highly heated become rancid. They cause
Free radicals.
free radicals that cause aging, and we need more antioxidants, and they're hard for our body to deal with. So the oils are bad. And the second thing that happens when we cook a starch with sugar, something like potatoes, which are one of the favorite things people like to deep fry or cook at high temperature, it creates dangerous chemicals. So when we heat starches and sugars above 120 degrees Celsius, which is about 248 in Fahrenheit, we create dangerous chemicals called acrylamides. And as we create higher temperatures yet, we create AGEs and all sorts of other chemicals out of the food that become very damaging for our bodies. So not only are we not getting those good foods in, we're creating foods that are carcinogenic, that trigger things like cancer. And so we want to stay away from those deep fried foods.
And I just want to say another thing about the fried oils or high heat oils. And every oil, as Dan says, has its own threshold heat. For example, flax oil has a lower threshold for heat than coconut oil. So you really want to make sure that you are refrigerating your flax oil, and you never use it for cooking. If you're going to use flax oil, it's just a tiny drizzle on a salad or something. Whereas coconut oil, you can have it a little higher heat because it doesn't, it can handle the higher heat. But nevertheless, when you cook oils above their threshold temperature, what happens is that they create free radicals in your body. Free radicals are like little wayward molecules that go around attacking your healthy cells, if you could think of it that way. And you don't want anything attacking your healthy cells. It's aging, it causes illness. You want to keep your cells healthy. So why do you want to put something in your body that you know is going to destroy your healthy cells? So these free radicals are not something that you want to entertain. Stay away from cooked oils. If you buy oils, buy cold-pressed or extra virgin oils and only use a very small amount. In my book, Raw Food Revolution Diet, which I wrote with two really amazing dietitians who have written a lot of books, we did a lot of research about what is a healthy amount of oil. Well, there really is no healthy amount, but a reasonable amount, because I know that oil is very addictive and it's a part of our society. A reasonable amount would be 2 teaspoons per person. And you know that when you have a salad dressing, you probably have more like 2 tablespoons, excuse me, of oil on your salad. So 2 teaspoons is not a lot. But there are a lot of things that a lot of different ways that you can thicken and add creaminess to your dressings so that they can still be luscious and delicious without, excuse me, without adding that extra oil. So, sorry. So when you are creating your meals, think about where can you cut back on those oils, because they are very hard for your body to digest, and they're very high in calories, so they take the space of other foods that would be more nourishing.
And when we talk about cooking oils, we talk particularly first about frying foods, but also broiling, grilling, and baking also are done at high temperatures. So these things will also make for bad oils, including like nuts, roasted nuts. Even if they're dry roasted, the nuts are very high in oil, so when we roast them, we're going to make bad oils in those nuts. So same way with processed foods, crackers, anything that's been baked typically is made with oils. And these oils are also all the wrong kind of oils. They're omega-6 fatty acids, which we have way too much of in our diet. And if we lower our omega-6s that are all in processed foods and cut those out, then the natural occurring omega-3s that we get on a plant-based can actually be used by our body in a way that is then helpful to provide the functions that are needed from those omega-3s, which are essential fatty acids, which means we have to get them from our diet because our body can't rearrange. They're one of the things that, out of all the amazing things the body does, it cannot create essential fatty acids. So you need to get omega-3s, and we get plenty of omega-6s in our diets.
Well, we get more omega-6s than we need and want because of all the snack foods. And all these snack foods, as Dan says, not only have they usually been baked or even fried, they're also salty, very salty. Now, I'm a culinary artist, I'm a chef, and so I am not against a limited amount of salt. Salt to enhance the flavors of other foods, but not to make the food salty, to taste salty. Then we're overdoing salt. And most snack foods are salty, and they have oil that's cooked at a high temperature. So these snack foods, these high processed foods, are foods that we should start to think about limiting, or even better, eliminating.
Another type of processed foods are processed starches and sugars. Anything that's white, basically all the nutrients have been removed from it. So white pasta, white sugars, these are things we want to avoid in our diet. They're just full of carbohydrates and calories and basically no nutrition. So we want to remove those from our diet.
And any concentrated sweeteners, actually, we want to limit. So whether they are white sugars that have been processed or other kinds of concentrated sweeteners, see if we can just start to use those for foods that we celebrate with. So desserts, in other words, are not something that we want to include in our diet every day. We like to say that desserts are not a food group. You have the different food groups here. Yes? Desserts are not one of those. Desserts are something that we have for celebration. I like to think of them as recreational drugs. And we live in an area where recreational drugs are pretty popular. We live in Mendocino County, Northern California. We grow a lot of grapes, and they make a lot of wines there, and they grow other kinds of recreational and medicinal herbs there. And so we know what those kind of recreational drugs are like, and they are really for celebration, and desserts are as well. We have an amazing pastry arts program at our school, Living Light Culinary Institute, but we do tell our students that these are for celebration. This is not something that you include in your diet every day. And they are amazing. We make things like tiramisu and different chocolate cakes and truffles and all those kinds of foods that you love. You don't have to give them up. These are important foods for us to be able to have when we have a birthday party or it's the holidays. We want to celebrate with family. And quite often when we make these foods for people, they will say, well, I had no idea I could eat foods like this. This makes it easy. Now I know I can do this because I don't have to give that up. But again, concentrated sweeteners, we can reduce, we can have smaller portions, we can have them less often.
So these desserts and things, these are things that make our life fulfilling, but not on a regular basis. But on a raw food diet, it's not about giving up. It's about adding more things that are really delicious in our diet. So we've got our raw foods on one end, which we talked about, from living greens like the sprouts and the wheatgrass and all the variety of colors. We got the foods on the other end, which are deep-fried, processed foods we want to let go of. And there are some foods that are in the middle. These are some foods that can be cooked foods that aren't harmful to our bodies. They may not have quite as much nutrition as the raw foods that are not heated above temperatures that kill off the phytonutrients and enzymes, but they're not going to be damaging to the same level. And the way we make sure they don't create these damaging chemicals is we cook using water. When we cook with water, whether it's steaming or boiling, the hottest water can get is 100 degrees. So at 100 degrees, it's still below those thresholds that cause dangerous chemicals. And it's above the temperature that starts killing off the phytonutrients and enzymes and vitamins in our food, so they're not going to be quite as nutritious, with a couple exceptions. There are actually a couple exceptions, which one is broccoli. Broccoli has a lot of, many of us have heard that it's good for anti-cancer. There's anti-cancer properties in broccoli. When cooked just a tiny bit, there's a little bit of heat applied, it releases some of these cancer-fighting chemicals. But it's a small amount. It's basically like pouring boiling water over the broccoli after it's been cut up and letting it sit, and it gets a little brighter green, and it gets a little more nutritious.
And it's still very crispy. It still feels very lively when you bite into it.
But if you continue to cook it, if you put it in a pan and you boil it, basically you're going to then kill off everything that's in it except for the minerals. Minerals will stay. And the other thing that actually stays, just when we're talking about things that stay in food when we cook them, are pesticides. So that's one of the reasons to do organic, because no matter how we process foods, the pesticides that they've been grown in are still there. And particularly when we process foods that are full of pesticides, we're concentrating them. So we're actually getting a concentrated dose of poisons that are meant to kill animals. So we believe highly in organic.
And we know that not everybody can afford 100% organic of everything that they buy. There is an organization on the internet that you can go to utilize best your organic dollars. In other words, buy the foods that you know you don't want to eat unless they're organic, but feel free to buy some other foods that you can afford only if they're not organic. So for example, by the way, the name of this organization is EWG.org. So if you want to write that down, EWG.org. It stands for Environmental Working Group. And they will tell you, give you a list of foods that are safe to eat, even if they're not organically grown, and other foods that are not safe to eat and you don't want to buy them, like strawberries, for example. Don't buy them unless they're organic, and certainly don't give them to your children because they're high in pesticides and you can't wash them off. So that can really be helpful. The other thing we should tell you is that Dad and I are not 100% raw 100% of the time. We make good choices, as I said before, about the foods that we eat. And we do include some cooked foods in our diet, not because we feel we need them for nutrition, but also because we enjoy them from time to time, and because when we're traveling, sometimes we can't get enough raw foods. So some of the foods that we do enjoy are some whole cooked grains, whole grains cooked, like quinoa and millet, for example. They're ancient grains that have no gluten. We enjoy those. We enjoy steamed sweet potatoes. We also, and sometimes white potatoes if we can't get sweet potatoes. White potatoes tend to make me sleepy, so I don't eat them unless it's evening. And it's important also for you to know how different foods affect you, because foods affect each of us a little bit differently. And what affects me one way may not affect you the same way. So I invite you to ask your body to tell you when you're eating something that is good for you and when you're eating something that's not. And your body really will respond to that and make a little agreement with it. Other foods that we like that are water cooked are legumes. I actually have an easier time digesting sprouted, cooked legumes than I do just sprouted legumes or just cooked legumes. So in our cafe, we own a restaurant. Besides our school, we have a restaurant and also a store and an inn, a hotel for our students. And in our cafe, we sprout all of our legumes before we cook them for soups. And when you make a soup, you drink the liquid. Anytime you are water cooking, you want to drink the liquid because the minerals often are in the liquid. And just remember that a lot of the heat-sensitive vitamins that are in the foods that you cook will be destroyed. So, for example, red bell peppers are very high in vitamin C. If you cook bell peppers, you'll lose that vitamin C because it's very, very delicate. So that's not a vegetable I would cook. I would eat my peppers raw. And if I want to have them a little bit warmer because it's winter time, then I might wash them in warm water or put them in the dehydrator and let them warm in the dehydrator a little bit so that I take the chill off of them. And as long as it's warmer than my body temperature, I won't get cold. And that's an important thing to know, because I know it gets cold here, and we want to make sure that you don't eat cooked foods all winter because you're afraid to eat cold foods and get cold. Raw food doesn't have to be cold. It can be warmer than your body temperature so it doesn't chill you. So first thing in the morning, if you're going to have a sprouted cereal, put warm water in it. Or put it in a jar and put the jar in warm water. If you're going to have a fruit smoothie and you're using frozen berries, put them in your smoothie at night and put that in the refrigerator. In the morning, they'll be defrosted. And then put that blender in a sink of warm water before you blend it. And then your smoothie won't be cold. It'll be warmer than your body temperature and you won't feel chilled. Another thing you can do is you can drink warm tea. That's what I've been doing since I've been here. Because I left California, it was 4 weeks ago, and it was warm there. And everywhere we went in the States, it was still warm. And then when we came to Europe, of course, it's getting later in the season, it got cold. So I've been walking around with warm tea. I drink a little bit of tea in between my salad, and it keeps me warmer so I can have my beautiful salads every day because I love my green salads. I don't want to give those up just because it's winter.
And you actually, when you first went raw, you were actually living in a ski resort.
I was living in a ski resort in Bend, Oregon, and I didn't know what it was going to be like. I came from Ann Wigmore Institute in Puerto Rico. It was winter time there, but it was very warm. Then I went home to Bend, and it was the coldest winter in the 7 years I had lived there. And yet my body was more in balance than it had ever been, and I was actually warmer. Everybody was complaining about the cold, and I actually went skiing, and it was 30 degrees below zero. But I wasn't eating chilled foods. I was making sure that my energy soup and my salads and everything that I was eating was warmer than my body. And I was also eating warming spices. So when I made soups, I used ginger and cinnamon and cloves and other kinds of spices that were warming to the body. And that also is helpful.
Yeah. So when you're looking at your food choices, we have our raw, healthy, sprouted foods on one end with all the variety. We have the foods that are damaging, and we have foods that are in the middle that we can have that are not going to be as damaging to our body but may not fill our nutrition needs but help us fill and satisfy our human needs. So it's about making the best choice that you can. And as we said, is in the wintertime, you can still have raw foods, just have them a little warmer. And warming up to 47 degrees is still a pretty warm temperature. It's a lot higher than your body temperature. So you can have great tasting food and make it really delicious. Now, part of having great tasting foods is we have the only school that teaches what we call gourmet raw vegan school. Culinary. But gourmet doesn't necessarily mean it's difficult and challenging and complex. It means you've learned the things to take a base of raw foods, which is maybe just good, and making it really delicious by learning things like flavor balancing. Flavor balancing is knowing the profiles of the different fruits and vegetables and how to mix them together so they're balanced to be very pleasing. We also pay attention to the textures. How small do we cut things up? How uniform? How, when we blend something, what is the texture of the blending? Is it foamy and frothy, or is it rich and creamy? And how does it look? These things all go together to make delicious food that's gourmet. And these are the things that we teach at our school and that we include in books that we have.
And so I would like to invite you all, anybody who is interested in possibly looking into some of the courses that we teach. As I said, at Living Light, we don't just teach people who are interested in making this a career, although many of the people who have come through our school have made it a very exciting career for themselves, many of whom were in jobs that they weren't feeling satisfied in, and they came to the school for their own personal enrichment, and then decided to change their career and teach about raw foods, or become raw food chefs, or in some other way serve the world by sharing this information. So we have a program guide here. If any of you are interested in them, we brought a limited number of them. We're happy to share them with those of you who might be interested. And I also want to encourage you to go either to our website or to Amazon, and we have our books. I don't know if our,
Can we get
our
the
books.
second slide?
We have a slide, a final slide there. We have 3 books that you might be interested in. My first book, Angel Foods, Healthy Recipes for Heavenly Bodies, does contain delicious both raw and cooked vegan foods. Raw Food Revolution Diet has by far the most nutritional information of any of my books, written by my co-authors Brenda Davis and Visanto Molina. And it also has wonderful recipes and helps you to get started on a raw food journey. And then our most recent book, Raw Food for Dummies, is really, we'd like to rename it Raw Food for Smart, Busy People. Because if any of you who are here certainly aren't dummies, if you're interested in raw food, you're free thinkers and you're smart. But the book is written in such a way to make it really easy for you to get started and to live this lifestyle successfully. So it gives you menus, it tells you everything you need to know about getting started and staying raw. Of course, it's in English. I apologize. It's not in Lithuanian yet. But if you can understand English, I'm sure you would enjoy it. And we couldn't bring them with us. We're on a world tour right now. From here, we're going to Asia. We just couldn't carry a lot of books with us. But you can buy it on Amazon, and I'm sure your bookstore can get it for you, too. So.
And we also, on both ends, have a clipboard with a sign-up sheet. So if you would like to get more information about our school and get on our mailing list, where we send out recipes and videos and helpful information
All
from time
free.
to time.
All free.
All free. Please feel free to sign up. And you also have our website, rawfoodchef.com. And
It's actually com.com.
it got
It
lost
cut
there.
off there. See, rawfoodchef.com.
And we also have a Facebook page on our site for Raw Food for Dummies, where we have lots of great videos, lots of wonderful tips on how to do things with raw foods to really make it easier and delicious. Because the key about being healthier is putting more health-promoting foods into your body. Make plant-based foods, raw foods, the key component of your diet. The more you put in, the better you feel. The longer you do it, the healthier you're going to be, and you'll see instant results and you'll see long-term results. I've been at it for 18 years, and I feel better every year. It's basically reversing 40-plus years of aging. So start now, keep it up, and keep up the good work. And we're so excited to be here and all the great work that's happening here. You've got a wonderful environment and a supportive world here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
everyone.
Cherie.
Thank you.
Cherie, and thank you, Dan. Thank you very much.